government involvement or interest in the board. In fact, as Tony would tell you, having a government representative on the board may actually benefit the airport in many ways.
Well, in fact, as part of the agreement, there's supposed to be a review panel, is there not?
Well, that's another important point, Kit, which I think has been lost in the mix. And at our agreement with the government of Guyana, remember that our agreement was negotiated for 1 year with expert airport consultants from overseas. This is a requirement of the IDB. And within that agreement, they provide for an oversight, a technical oversight body that will overlook all of the technical issues such as Tony discussed, and can deal with any differences of opinion that may exist between operators, or as in the case now with ASL, or other technical issues.
And in accordance with the agreement, Tony, the review panel, I believe, is chaired by a representative of the ministry responsible for aviation.
Correct.
The Director General of Civil Aviation is involved. The
He's
airport
on it as well,
CEO would be in it. There's provision for
an ICAO representative, I think.
No, not an ICAO. It would be a regional aviation authority representative like CASAS.
Yes, correct.
There's a representative from the Environmental Protection Agency, which would deal with all of this whole issue with fuel. So this
may be an unfair question to both of you, but why wasn't it appointed?
It's supposed to be appointed by the ministry responsible. In other words, the relevant minister would have to appoint the review panel.
And have you talked to him about that review panel?
Yeah, we have requested to the government, and in fact, I think at a meeting with the Air Services, when they were present when the minister was trying to resolve this issue, we had indicated to him very strongly that he should proceed to set up this review panel, because we feel that we are in a very difficult position, and in terms of dealing with it, and to have a professional technical analysis of what is going on is important.
I want to come back to you, Tony. Arjun has not been very kind to you either. She's accused the airport's management, amongst other things, of deliberately acting, and I quote her words, to impede the growth of ASL. And she has said that you've been denying access to land, and now more recently, to bring in cheaper fuel onto the airport. What's the truth of this?
In the case of access to land, the land that Air Services have insisted that they get is land has already been leased to other operators. Unfortunately, in a mix like this, the airport operator, the airport itself, has to be extremely careful that it protects the rights of all leaseholders on the airport. In the case of fuel, this is a different matter. The airport, as I explained to you before, has to meet internationally accepted standards for the transportation, handling, and storage and dispensing of fuel. I realize that my colleagues, my friend and colleague, Captain Fazil Khan, and he's correct, says that GCA has no such regulations. While that is correct, the truth of the matter is that I can refer to several international countries that have to meet and do meet those standards. I can refer to the UKCAA Air Navigation Order 393 will demonstrate that there are standards that are required. Under the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, they have orders that are required. Even under IATA, under their standards, there are standards that are required. So now, based on those international standards, the airport, as an international airport, has to prepare a minimum standard of its own, even if the CA does not have a standard in Guyana, that it has to what you call expects all its operators to meet. And really, if Air Services had come to us in the first place and said they want to be a fuel handling agent, we would walk them through all the steps necessary to meet that.
Explain that to the listeners. They are not an authorized fuel
Ogle
handling
Airport
agent?
has only one authorized fuel handling agent,
At this
Caribbean
moment.
Aviation Maintenance Services at this time. And they have dealt in the past with Texaco, Chevron, internationally accepted company whose guidelines, codes and standards are way above everything we know. The other people that we have are Rubis, who are now taking over from them. Those guys have similar standards that they have to meet. They're audited internationally by the airlines that use them, and they would lose their business if the airlines didn't find they met the standard. Now, in the case of the airport has borrowed from them because there are no local standards, and international organizations and international countries like the UK, like the CA, and prepared its own minimum standards. So what would happen is we would take a fuel handling agent, any new fuel handling agent, and walk them through the process of what is required for them to become fuel handling agents as well. Nobody has applied to the airport, and nobody has been denied the right to become a fuel handling agent.
Now, CAMS has been a fuel handling agent and is an approved fuel handling agent on the airport long before, in fact, OAI was ever established. Is that true?
Yes, that's true, Kit. Trans-Guyana Airways brought the first private turbine aircraft into the country in 1993. And we were forced to build our own fuel installations because you had no avjet storage and so on. So very early, we got involved in the fuel business and had to set up our own storage facilities in keeping with international standards. When Gaisuco were the original fuel handlers at airport for Avgas, so when Gaisuco gave it up, it was only natural at the time for Texaco to work out an agreement with us to manage the fuel installation. So we've been doing that since 1993, as a matter of fact.
And all of the 12 operators there have been supplied by fuel from CAMS.
Yes, in fact, CAMS also does the maintenance for 4 of the other commercial operators. So we do not only provide fuel to all the operators, but we also provide maintenance service to 4 of our...
Now,
Let me just say something.
Yeah.
We also provide fuel to international operators. Last year we had the U.S. military down here, and they had to supply fuel to their helicopters. They have to supply fuel to any itinerant that comes into Ogle, and they have to supply fuel to their partners in Suriname.
And they would certainly have to satisfy themselves that CAMS is an authorized fuel.
Absolutely.
No, I think the point here, Kit, which is very important, is that it is not because we have the shareholdings, which I've given you the history, that CAMS was given the fuel industry. We were there from inception.
It's really part of the traditional development of the airport.
Yeah, and none of the operators had any difficulty.
I want to
with
ask
this.
you a much more important question on this subject, because again, Annette Arjun has accused you in effect of price gouging. She says that CAMS is selling the fuel at exorbitant prices. And they've made some comparisons with the sale of fuel at Chedijagan Airport.
Well, Kit, I'm glad that you answered that question because Annette and Dave, her husband, are very close friends with her, and I'm actually surprised at Annette because she's been saying that the difference in price is $323 between the posted airfield price between Ogle and Tamari. That is actually false. I actually today walked with an invoice to Air Services dated on August the 15th, where we sold them fuel for $1,556 per imperial gallon. This is the invoice here, Kit.
Can the camera see it?
This is a difference. This is a difference of $88, not $323.
And why the difference? It's a very small difference, but why the difference?
Well, Kit, because when we operate the airport, we are operating it to full Chevron, Texaco, and now Rubis standards, which require insurance. We have to have a $7.5 million credit that we offer the operators, which costs us a lot of money. We have overheads. So there's always been a small difference, I would say ranging between 3 to 5%, depending on volumes and changes in the movement of prices over the years. So I think that I would prefer to give Annette the benefit of the doubt, because I know that we sell in imperial gallons. And I know that the fuel that they're now importing is in U.S. gallons. And there's a difference of 20% between one fuel and the other. So I think she probably made a genuine mistake. I would like to think so. But I think, unfortunately, there's been a gross misrepresentation of the fact.
Well, let's get to the more fundamental issue. Now, they have brought in fuel themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They have, quite surprisingly, it would appear, been given government permission to bring in fuel at a appreciably lower price.
Right.
And this fuel arrives in the country in ISO containers from the USA.
Mm-hmm.
But is it not a fact that since last year, the airport through CAMS has applied to the government to do the very same thing?
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you raised that point, Kit. You know, as an airline operator myself, you know, airlines always are looking for the best price fuel. I mean, you hear the RedJet CEO talking about fuel prices, and I know that the phenomenon of price differences between the different airports sometimes is related to volume. So, you know, for example, in Barbados, they do about 40 million gallons a year as opposed to 2 million at Tenerife. So obviously there'll be a price difference. But CAMS has always tried to negotiate good prices. They struggled for a long time with Chevron. When Chevron was sold, we approached the government because we had done our own analysis that we could bring in fuel cheaper in ISO containers. And having all the necessary experience, and we already had, Tony, the required fuel installations and so on, we thought that this would be received well by government. But when we applied in November, afterwards, the Prime Minister indicated to me...
So you applied through the Office of the Prime Minister, is that
through the Office of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister indicated to me that the government were deliberating on this issue, but for the time they were choosing to restrict the importation to only the big oil companies, which at the time would be Guy Oil and Rubis. I think they were looking at having Guy Oil come into the market to compete. So they were not opening the market, so to speak, to other operators. So it came as a great shock to us that all of a sudden that ASL would be granted permission, because this is not just a CAMS Trans-Guyana. You'd have to appreciate that we are providing fuel to all the other commercial operators, so all of them would be disadvantaged by that fact. The other thing that I would like to say is that, you know, we've always complained to Chevron before Kit about this difference in price between Ogle and Tenerife, because we've always recognized that we would be, so to speak, be accused of unscrupulous type behavior. We've always tried very hard to get the prices as low as possible, with some difficulty because you're only dealing with one supplier. What is interesting is that out of all of this, I have also been trying very hard to get the prices at the airports down, and you know, quite interestingly, I have some good news for the other commercial operators who I know are very concerned about this advantage that the ASL has, is that Rubis have